Just before I start, I don't know if any of you have had dealings with Alzheimer's Australia or Alzheimer's Australia New South Wales, but the most important information I can give you today, and I've got handouts here you're very welcome to take, is the helpline number at the bottom there. It's a free number. It's an advice line. You don't have to need help, but you can just ring and ask questions and find out about things. But it's a national helpline number, so if you have friends and relatives in other states, it works for them as well. But I used that number myself about 7 years ago because I was worried about Mum, and Mum does have dementia. But it was one of those things where we just didn't know. So if I tell you how wonderful the services are, I'm not just trying to big note what we do. I'm telling you as somebody whose family had the benefit of the services of Alzheimer's Australia. But we are a charity, and we're the charity that looks after people with dementia, their families and their carers. We provide a number of services, including mainly sort of advocacy, general support, information, education, and things like that. I've got 2 slides that I'm going to run through now that just talk about what we do. But I thought if you know somebody who perhaps could do with some of our services and they just don't know where to start, please direct them to the helpline. So we offer general advisory and support, that advice and support about dementia and about what to do if you're living with dementia, if you've got the diagnosis, or if you're living with someone with dementia. We have a special group of people that come together with those who've been recently diagnosed. I don't know if any of you have had any dealings with someone or know of somebody with... Do you know of somebody who has dementia or Alzheimer's disease? A lot of us do. But when you've been recently diagnosed, it's a pretty scary diagnosis. So it's a way of bringing those people together, and we can talk through exactly what it is, answer some questions, help people plan ahead for what lies ahead when you get a diagnosis of dementia. We also offer peer support groups. In other words, we coordinate social groups of people with dementia and their carers to be able to come together. Because I've got to tell you, there's nothing like walking into a room full of people such as this, where either everybody has dementia or everybody's a carer, because then you don't need to explain anything. You're not worried about anything. You're not worried about who's saying what or who's where. Everybody understands. And there's nobody understands what you're living with if you're living with dementia or someone with dementia than somebody else who's also going down that path. All right, so it's a really comforting thing. And also carers and people often get tips from one another as well. We have a special group of key workers for what we refer to as our younger onset dementia group of clients. Most people who are diagnosed with dementia are diagnosed in their 70s and 80s, but you can get it at a younger age. And if you're under 65, we have some special key workers. So again, if you know somebody who may need that, please let them know. We have special key workers. I'll talk more about that when we look at prevalence. And we provide education for people working in the aged care industry or in the dementia industry, but we also provide free education for people with dementia and for their families and carers. So again, if you want to know information about it, if you want something like that, please ring the helpline and they'll let you know when we're going to be running information evenings or courses in this area. Last one. we offer counselling. Now, I'm one of 5 children, and we probably should have taken advantage of the counselling because there were 5 different opinions about what should have been happening when Mum got her diagnosis and what should have been happening for Dad, with Dad, things like that. But it can be either done face-to-face, one-on-one, as a group, or over the phone, or through Skype, for those of you who like to do that. So it's a way of just trying to actually help people to understand what the options are, and sometimes to bring all family members together in one room when there are differences of opinion is a good idea. We have a wealth of information and resources, books, DVDs, and we have a library that's based in North Ryde in our head office, but we can send that out to you. If you join Alzheimer's Australia as a member, it costs about $15. We can then send you anything that you want. So if you say, look, my neighbour's been diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia, we may be able to get you some books or some DVDs that will help you to understand what it is that they're living with and make you a better neighbour. We do community awareness days like today, which is really just an opportunity for us to give you a bit of information, but also for you to be able to ask questions. And I should have said, I'm more than happy. I know we've got limited time, but if there is a question as I go along, it's often easiest if I answer it at the time. So if you have a question, please ask it at the time rather than wait till the end. If it's something quick, I'll answer it straight away. If it's going to take a little while or I think it's very detailed, perhaps we can chat afterwards. But it's better if you ask it at the time. It's not that I think you'll forget. I just think it's better to do it. Last two things we do have a little thing called Safely Home, which involves a little bracelet which just has a number on it. And it's for people who get disoriented, get separated, get lost and forget where they need to be. And perhaps it would be good if my mum had this, but mum's now in a nursing home, so I know that she's safe. But you see, if mum and I got separated and the police found her, she'd tell them her name's Geraldine, but they'd say, where do you live? She'd tell them Cootamundra, because that's where she grew up. But she's actually in a nursing home in the northern suburbs of Sydney. So I don't want her taken home to Cootamundra. So what the little bracelet does, it just has a number on. The police can put the number in their database and it pops up and it says, the lady's Geraldine, she lives in North Turramurra, her daughter's Paddy, and they give me a call and say, we've found mum, we've taken her home. So the service itself is free. There's a little charge to get the bracelet, but you can get that service either through us or through the New South Wales Police. And again, it's a way of enabling people to stay at home a bit longer, because we try to do everything we can to make it so that people can stay together, stay home, and live in the most comfortable surroundings, because we want people with dementia to live well, and we want the families of those people to live well also. And lastly, we have what we call our memory van, which is our really a mobile resource centre. So it's parked out in the car park now, and that enables me to travel all around New South Wales with loads of the booklets, the brochures, and other things to be able to bring them out to the country areas. And we don't call this a country area, but to give you an idea, the van was out in Cobar and Nyngan last week. We've got two vans. The other one, is up on the north coast. And it gets all around New South Wales. So it's been to Broken Hill, it's been to Albury, it's been to Berrigan, Deniliquin, Tweed Heads. It's been all over so far this year. So we try to keep going out to the non-metropolitan areas. But anyway, enough about us. So this is what I'm going to run through quickly today. This is not a medical lecture, as you've probably gathered by now. I'm just going to talk briefly, remind us how the brain works. We're going to look at what's normal changes in our brain as we age, and then look at dementia, so the things that we don't want happening in our brain as we age. But then I also want to focus on these 5 simple steps involved in keeping our brain healthy. So this is as technical as I get. And all I'm trying to do here is the diagram is meant to represent the brain, and it's really just a way of reminding us that when we think of the brain as being one thing, the brain is one thing, like a skeleton is one thing, and a skeleton is made up of all sorts of different bones that perform different functions. And you can break the bone in your little finger, but that doesn't stop you walking or talking or generally functioning pretty well. It's the same with the brain. We can have a problem with one lobe, one part of the brain, but it's not like the whole thing is switched off. And we have different lobes to do different functions and support different functions in the brain. So we have some that help us recognise people, recognise things. They always say there's a big difference between forgetting where you put your car keys, because you do, I do that all the time, and I don't know if anybody else does, that's perfectly normal. But imagine having your car keys in your hand and not knowing what they were. So you don't recognise them for what they are. And it's the same with people. There's parts that help us to understand information. And part of that is just understanding steps in normal day-to-day tasks, but part of it is also tied in with speech, language, communication, because there's parts of the brain that deal with that as well. There's parts of the brain that help us interpret the senses. So yes, we hear with our ears, we see with our eyes, but the brain has to interpret that for us to make sense of what it is we're seeing and hearing. We have parts of the brain that help us to make decisions, to plan and to organise things. And we have parts that look after the automatic functions, like body temperature, breathing, heartbeat, swallowing. So those are all automatic functions that the brain is controlling, even though we're not actively asking it to do these things. And with remembering things, so with memory, there are 2 major parts of the brain. The part of the brain, the hippocampus, that looks after short-term memory, the stuff that tells you to remember what you did this morning. Remember the joke, what did you have for breakfast, what did you do last week? But then there's a completely separate part of the brain that looks after long-term memory. So that's why sometimes you'll meet people and they can't remember what they did last week, but they can tell you all about their holiday in 1985 in great detail, because that's a totally separate part of the brain. Anyway, so just to keep that in mind, that there's different parts of the brain responsible for different functions. I do like to run this as a bit of a workshop. I will have a few brain games for us to play in a minute, but can we do our first exercise, please? Just stay seated, but both feet on the ground, and then lift the right leg and do big clockwise circles with the right leg. Clockwise, it's got to be clockwise. Now raise your right hand, keep the foot going. Right, keep the foot going, keep the foot going. Now draw the number 6 with the right hand. See, the people in the front row have to tell me what's happening because they know I can see them. People at the back are sitting there very quietly. I'm hoping that you found that your foot wanted to go anti-clockwise. That's good, that just means you've got your brain with you, because the part of the brain on the left side which controls movement down the right will actually try and pull that back the other way. I've seen people cheat by drawing the 6 upside down, but anyway, that's okay. Just a little cheat. Okay, so as we get older, there are normal changes in the brain. None of us today look like we did when we were 25. There are things that change as we get older, and it is perfectly normal that we just process information more slowly. We think a bit slower, we're not as fast on the uptake of new things, but that's just a normal part of ageing. It's also perfectly normal to be a bit more forgetful as well. So don't worry if you're forgetting a few things. And I'm not talking about even to people's names. You know, when people say, oh, what was the name of that actress that was in the movie, 1964, you know, she played... Because that's not information you draw on a regular basis, so that's okay. Interestingly, you know, some good news is, as we get older, we have a larger vocab, which is great. So we're obviously picking up more words and phrases along life's path. But dementia is not a normal part of ageing. You'll see that written on about every other slide. There are a number of things that can have an impact on our brain and our memory and our thinking, okay? Because the brain's not just about memory. Just being tired, you know what it's like. If you haven't had a good night's sleep or you've had a couple of, unrestful nights, you don't work as well as when you're well rested, do you? So that has an impact on how we function. If we're stressed or anxious, that can certainly make us a little more forgetful. It's like we're on overload. We're a little over programmed. We're grieving. Now, clearly, when we're grieving, we know when if we forget things, we can just say, look, I was so distracted because I was so upset. We can let ourselves go with that. But it's when grief is one of those rotten things that can come back 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months later, even 18 months later. And it might be a birthday or an anniversary or a song that suddenly takes us back to the person that we lost. And we can find ourselves a little at sea. You feel like you're just not functioning properly. You feel really flat. You don't know what it is. It may be just simply, it's like another wave of grief that's come back. So, cut yourself some slack. And sometimes you've got to work out what it is that might be actually distracting us. If we're in pain, that's a distraction for the brain. And you don't think that if you've got a sore toe that should affect your brain, but it's a distraction. Pain is a distraction. Depression, I don't know if you've known people who are depressed or if you've had depression yourself. You know your outlook on life is very different when you're depressed than when you're your usual chipper self. Okay, so depression can have a big impact on our outlook and our thinking and how we respond to things. Sometimes medications, especially if you've started taking a new medication, you might find yourself a bit lightheaded, a bit forgetful, a bit, woozy, a bit fuzzy-headed. Sometimes it's actually worth talking to the doctor about this, because they may be able to give you a different prescription to do the same thing that doesn't give you that side effect. But please don't just accept that medication is going to actually have an impact on how you work, because we don't want that happening in our brain. It could be as simple as nutrient deficiencies. We need vitamin B12 for our brain and our whole nervous system. And if your vitamin B12 gets low, your short-term memory will be impacted. So wouldn't it be lovely if your memory problems could be solved by either making sure that we've got B12 in our diet, or even taking a supplement, or perhaps even having a quarterly B12 injection? Wouldn't that be lovely? So again, please, please, please talk to your doctor if you've got any concerns. It could also be as simple as dehydration, and this is just water, I promise. But often we don't drink as much water, and I'm not talking tea and coffee. So it's not just fluid intake. I'm talking about water. Water gets absorbed much more quickly than tea and coffee, and that can actually give us a little boost at times. So if you get dry, if I lose my words, I'll have a slurp of water. But I mean, do you ever have those days where you go to the cupboard and you open the pantry door or something and stand there thinking, what did I come here for? And you have to shut the door and go back. Not just me then, good. Sometimes just a glass of water can be enough to actually give you a little bit of a boost, okay? Now, everything I've talked about so far is either very temporary or it's fixable, or it can be fixed either by us or by going to a doctor. Okay, so everything I've mentioned up there so far. So if you have any concerns, please talk to your GP about it. Okay, it could be something simple. Of course, changes in memory and thinking might be the first sign of dementia as well. So again, another good reason to talk to your doctor. So please, any concerns, you must talk to your GP. They're not mind readers. Do we understand the difference between Alzheimer's disease and dementia? Okay, dementia is the overall term that we give to the symptoms that we see when there's been a change of brain function or a loss of brain function. And that might include things like memory or behaviours or language or personality. So there's a number of different aspects. But dementia itself is not a physical thing, it's the symptoms that we see. So, and there are over 100 different diseases and conditions that can give us dementia, right? So Alzheimer's disease is responsible for about 70%, to at least 2/3 of all cases of dementia. So that's why people often use the term interchangeably, because it is responsible for most cases. And Alzheimer's disease does start in that short-term memory part of the brain that I talked about. So people forgetting what they did yesterday or forgetting that they agreed to meet you for coffee or things like that. So that's the main sort of difference. It's this range, combination of symptoms that we see is dementia. And we don't help because we call ourselves Alzheimer's Australia, but I think you'll find that will change soon. We'll call ourselves Dementia Australia rather than Alzheimer's because it doesn't help that we appear to be only looking after people with Alzheimer's disease. And it's about the fact that these changes in the brain are starting to have an impact on our ability to remain independent or to just carry on normal day-to-day tasks involved in day-to-day life. I don't know if you can see that. She's saying, my memory's so bad I can't remember what it is I'm not supposed to tell you. But it is just my way of trying to say it's not just about memory. Having said that, when we look at what is dementia and what are the symptoms of dementia, because Alzheimer's disease is responsible for so many cases and it starts in short-term memory, then memory loss is probably the biggest symptom of dementia. It could be, though, the first sign is language. Language, the part of the brain that looks after language, may have been impacted. So, and by that I'm talking about losing simple words like drink or chair or car. Words we've known since we were littlies start to escape us, right? So simple words start to get lost in our language. And also for people who have English as a second language, we'll start to find that the English fades and their original language starts to come into play more. So they slip in a bit more Italian or a bit more Arabic or Greek or Chinese. So you see those sorts of changes happening as well. Also with language, quite often with people with dementia, it's as if the words are floating and they take a little more time to understand what's being asked of them. And it's as if they need the words to settle down so they can actually see them all in order. And especially in an environment like this where you might have a lot of people having a chat over a cuppa, it can make it much harder for them to focus on exactly what it is you're telling them or asking them. And the trouble for us is that if it's a simple question or a simple statement, you expect people to pick up on it straight away. Right? If it's, do you have a pen? Or, would you like some coffee? They're yes or no questions. We want an answer straight away. And so often you can bombard people with questions, whereas people with dementia sometimes need a little more time just to understand what it is that's being asked of them. And that's one of the changes we have to make when we're engaging with them. And counting, or the numeracy part of the brain that looks after a lot of our numbers skills, may be the first sign that something's not right. Because all of these different flavours of dementia are often named after the part of the brain that they start in. So if it's the part of the brain that looks after numbers, it'll have a different name. It won't be Alzheimer's disease. And by numbers, I mean, I'll give you a couple of examples. I have a girlfriend who, when her dad comes to visit, he always takes the two grandchildren out for an ice cream. The first sign for her that something was wrong was when he took out a $20 note and he said, "Will this be enough?" And she thought he was clowning around. It was when he got his wallet out to get more money out that she suddenly realised he had no idea how much 2 ice creams should cost. And when people lose track of money and the right amount to pay for something, that can make them very vulnerable. We have another client, the gentleman's only 61. He runs a small business in rural New South Wales, or was running it. And so a spare parts business, so he's buying and selling, and he had product lines, product codes, it was all numbers, and he did a lot of it in his head. And he's just lost all sense of numbers. And he told me he went out and bought a calculator because he thought, I'll outsource it to the box and put numbers in. But then he said, I don't know what the number is it's telling me. Is that the buy price, sell price? Is that how many stock I've got? So he's actually had to give up his business to his son. He's 61. And that's the sign for him that things weren't right. And tied in with the numeracy of numbers and counting is time. If I said to Mum, I'll be back in 5 minutes, and I duck into the shop to get milk and bread, 30 seconds after I've gone, Mum might just say, well, she's gone home, I'll go home too. And that's how easily people can get separated. Right? So it's not that they didn't hear you, it's not that they didn't listen, it's not that they didn't understand in the moment that they were meant to sit out here and wait for you. It's just that they simply forgot. And so 5 minutes means nothing to them. So that's it. And also with Mum one day, Dad and I raced out to the bank and I said to her, we'll be back. It was 3 o'clock. I said, we'll be back at 4. Even put a note on the table. So I thought if she gets up to have a cuppa, she always sits there, put the note down. When we got back at 3:30, she was distraught because she thought she'd been alone all day. And so she just lost sense of time. And that's the last thing you ever want to do to somebody. So you have to find a different way of expressing things to people with dementia. About 2 weeks after that, my dad had to go to hospital late at night. So when he rang the ambulance, I spoke to the ambulance guy, because Mum and Dad were in Mittagong, and I just said, Mum's got dementia, she's either got to go with you or you need to leave her a note to say I'm on my way. And the guy was fabulous. He didn't use numbers. He simply said, Greg's in hospital, Greg's okay, Paddie's on her way. And when I got there, an hour or more later, Mum was fine. And I said, you weren't worried? And she said, oh no, I found the note, found it in her hand, but found the note. And it said you were coming, so she was happy. So there's different ways that we need to change, just little subtleties that we can do when we're actually engaging with people with dementia. With the next one, understanding. Understanding is a very general term, but it's about understanding the normal tasks in day-to-day activities. Can you imagine standing in your own kitchen and not knowing how to make a cuppa? Don't care whether it's tea or coffee, just not knowing the steps involved. You know you're in the right place, this is where you always come to have your cuppa, but not remembering you've got to put the kettle on, you've got to get the tea or coffee out, get the mugs. It's imagine all of those steps involved. And that's the sort of thing that can make it very challenging for someone with dementia. And the other thing is we often find people, especially with Alzheimer's disease, get very tired. And just imagine all day, every task that you do, you have to focus really hard, and it's a real effort to just get through everything. It means that they're on full, they never really get to relax because everything requires an intense amount of concentration. So it's very tiring. With spatial awareness, space is about, distance. So if I go to put something down, if I go to put my cup down and I miss the edge of the table because my spatial capabilities are starting to fade, it's a bit of a problem for the club because I've just spilt some water on the floor, but, it's not life and death. But if I'm having trouble getting downstairs because I can't judge the distance, can't work out where that first step is or where the last step is, then I'm more likely to have a fall, and that can be much more challenging. But if I'm just trying to cross the road, Now, I can see how far across the road it is, but if I can't judge how far away that truck is that's coming down the road, or how fast it's coming down the road at me, then I can find myself in the middle of the road at the wrong time, and that can obviously have devastating effects. So with spatial capabilities, we need to look at these things. What if I'm losing my spatial capabilities and I'm actually behind the wheel of that truck? I don't really need to say more, do I? We've got some little brochures there, the blue ones, about staying on the move with dementia, and it's really hard because generally speaking, dementia and driving don't mix well, but then there are stages too. So again, the little booklets might help you if it's something that's of concern to you or a loved one. But with spatial awareness, it's also about recognising, making sure that places are familiar. Again, that's standing in your own kitchen and not knowing where anything is because you don't know where the cups are. You don't know where the tea and the coffee are. It's that sort of thing. And spatial awareness is about putting things in the right place. So you go to the fridge to get the milk for your cup of tea, and there's the dishwashing liquid. And the milk is actually in the pantry, and it's been there since Wednesday. So there's things like that. While they're not life and death, but it does interrupt our ability to remain independent. Or people cooking a meal, and that's fine, and then they put it in the cupboard rather than in the fridge, so that then perhaps they're eating things that aren't healthy. So there's lots of things about keeping people well that we have to consider. But again, it's about those familiar things. And tied in with spatial awareness is also that part of the brain that helps us to recognise things. If you recognise you've got the milk, you wouldn't put it in the cupboard, you'd put it in the fridge. So it's about that sort of thing. Sometimes we find, again, it's about recognising people. Mum doesn't always know me when I go to visit her now. So, I've learned, and I've been taught through our staff, to take away that, because they said often people read body language. It's like a child. A child knows if you're angry or if you're happy to see them. And so every time I go to see Mum now, I go in and I say, "Hello, Mum, it's Paddy, your favourite." And then she says, "I don't have favourites." And that's how we started the visit. So it's a way of breaking the ice, and it's a way I don't have to worry now whether she knows me or not, because I tell her, and then we get that bit out of the way. But it's about things like that. But all equally, if it's somebody that you know, at least for me, you come up and say hello to them and they don't recognise you, they can react a different way. If it's a long lost friend, you go up to give them a hug, they don't know whether it's somebody attacking them. And they can scream or fight you off. And that can be a bit heartbreaking when all you're trying to do is give them a hug. But that's where there's different ways it is. It's about changing the way we behave to let them know, "Hello, Mum, it's Paddy," so that she doesn't mind when I lean over and give her a kiss. It's that sort of thing. With behaviours as well, sometimes, how are we doing for time? Am I doing all right? Okay. Sometimes one of the first things we see is this repetitive behaviour. So how are we doing for time? Are we all right? Okay. And they do, but people do this and they don't know they're asking the same question over and over, because if they did, they wouldn't ask it, would they? How are we doing for time? Are we all right? I know I make light of it, but people can, especially, as I said, people worry when things aren't adding up all the time, and so they can get quite obsessed about one little detail, and if you're my carer and it's just you and I home alone all day and I've got dementia and I keep asking that question over and over, let me tell you, 3 times it's not funny anymore, 4 times, 5 times, 10 times in a minute. It becomes so frustrating. But that's understandable. I mean, carers need to cut themselves some slack. It is actually understandable that a lot of these changes are frustrating for us as carers, but we have to kind of let a lot of things go. So this is the transition that we have to make, because they can't remember that they've asked the question. They certainly wouldn't ask it if they thought it was going to annoy us. So there's things like that where we have to keep reminding ourselves that there are things to distract. Sometimes it can be music, sometimes, look at the time, let's have a cup of tea, come into the kitchen and help me. It's a distraction. There's lots of different tips, but again, that's all for the care, of course. That's not what I'm here for today, sorry. I know I'm going too long on this. With behaviours also, sometimes it can be tied into personalities. There may be specific behaviours, but quite often it's the people closest to us, our loved ones, that notice when there's changes in your behaviour. And they don't have to be abnormal behaviours per se. If you're the kind of person who always wears a hat, and then you start to go out and you're not wearing your hat, that's unusual behaviour for you, but it's not abnormal behaviour. Nobody here's got a hat on. That's not abnormal behaviour. But you know what I mean? Like if you're a gentleman who always goes out with shirt and tie, and suddenly you show up to days like this in a t-shirt and shorts, you'd say, well, that's not his normal behaviour. So it's often those people closest to us that know that that's not really the way they would normally do things. And people who are normally very nicely dressed will start wearing their clothes inside out. I'm just checking one's in the right way. Or they'll wear a dirty shirt, or they'll wear the same shirt day after day. Right, if you see me in this again, like this is a uniform, all right? I have more than one of these, so that's why I wear lots of green shirts. But it's that if you've got that favourite red and white check shirt, you know, you don't want people wearing it day after day because it's not healthy. So there's simple things we can do, like buy another shirt, so that even when they're having their shower, put the second one out and whip the other one into the laundry. There's little things we can do to just work with the person without having arguments over little things. Also tied in with behaviour, though, sometimes we can see, you know, people who were very polite, and maybe it's a change of personality, maybe they're just odd behaviours for that person. You know, dear old Auntie May, who was always so prim and proper, starts using language that you didn't think she'd ever heard, let alone use, you know. Or some behaviours can be, in fact, antisocial, because sometimes people lose their filtering ability, so they don't realise what's polite and what's not. You know, so that can be awkward for the person with them, awkward for the people around them. And that's where, going back to those cafe connects that we call, the support groups and the social groups that come together, nobody cares what's said, and you know, nobody really notices. And also changes in personality. Sometimes you will find those people who were very gregarious, always involved in the bowling club, and loved bowling and everything else, or golf, or horse racing or something. They're not going to any of the horse races anymore. They're not going out to golf. They're never in the comp. Now, are they withdrawing socially because they're a bit depressed, they're a bit flat? Or are they finding it awkward to go out because they're not recognising people, and people are recognising them and they're finding that uncomfortable? Or is it a real change in personality that we're seeing here? So sometimes we see that people who are outgoing become very quiet. People prim and proper, like Auntie May, become not so prim and proper. But also some people who are very gentle and gentlemanly can become quite angry, aggressive, even violent. And that can make life challenging. So there can be all of these changes, again, because they all relate to different parts of the brain. Right, but I know I've laboured on that one too much. Well, Alzheimer's usually starts in that hippocampus, which is the short-term memory, but they've identified that there are what they call plaques and tangles. So you can imagine the plaques are sort of gathering around the brain cells, the tangles are complicated things between the brain cells, and it just means that then it can't get through. And when the messages are not getting through, that part of the brain actually starts to die. And while the brain and most of our body will try to regenerate, if you slice a whole load of skin off your finger, the skin will grow back. If you slice your finger off, it doesn't grow back. So there's parts of us that can regenerate and parts that can't. And that's what we're trying to do. And the brain's remarkable. It's soft tissue. It will try to do this. If there's an injury somewhere, it'll try to find an alternate path. That's why if you have a stroke or something, people can actually get a lot of their movement back, as long as we can try and train it to find another way around the bit of the brain that's been damaged. But with the diseases related to dementia, they're slow, progressive diseases. And that's why Alzheimer's, while it starts in the short-term memory part of the brain, will move to the language part of the brain, will move to parts that will help us with senses so that people can read words but they can't make sense of them. It'll move eventually around to language, communication, personality, even to the long-term memory part of the brain, and ultimately to the part of the brain that looks after automatic function. So it's a slow, progressive thing. And I mean, we could be talking over 20 years from day one to the last day. But, Mum was diagnosed at 87. We have to be careful not to be anxious about things that are unnecessarily anxious. I mean, Mum was never going to live 25 years with dementia when she was diagnosed at 87. she was never going to live another 25 years without dementia at that age. Do you know what I mean? So, yes, sir. On this, Alzheimer's disease, I said, is the most prevalent one. These are the next three. Lewy body disease, it can often show itself as having hallucinations. So people are convinced you can't go outside because there's elephants in the car park. And often you can't, arguing with people telling them there are no elephants doesn't do any good. Because if I really believe that, telling me I'm wrong again is not going to help me. It just creates an argument. So often the easiest thing is to say, right, give me a minute, I'll ring someone, call the circus, they've taken the elephants, it's okay, we can go now. You know, there's a way of you enter their reality to come back to ours. Vascular dementia is the one that will follow vascular incidents. But just because you've had heart problems or you've had a stroke or you've had a heart attack doesn't mean you're definitely going to get dementia. But sometimes it's those little strokes that we haven't realised that we've been having have been doing damage to the brain, and that's where the diseases can set in. And then frontotemporal just refers to those frontal lobes and temporal lobes, which again are about the planning and organising. And I'm not talking about organising a wedding. I'm talking about organising to put your socks on before you put your shoes on, not the other way round. I'm just checking here. It's all right. I'll quickly run through the prevalence and then you get your 5 steps. Most people, as I said, are over 65. In fact, most people are diagnosed in late 70s and 80s with dementia, but you can get it at a younger age. And if you're under the age of 65, we have special key workers who work with our younger onset clients. So that would be people in their early 60s. At a younger age. And if you're under the age of 65, we have special key workers who work with our younger onset clients. So that would be people in their early 60s, or 50s, or 40s, or 30s, or 20s. And we've sadly had a recent case of 2 teenagers, a brother and sister in Victoria, who had a very rare form of childhood dementia. So none of us have it in our life plan to get dementia. None of us have it in our life plan to look after our other half with dementia. But we also don't plan on looking after our children with dementia. And that is a reality for some people. So the reason we have these special key workers who, if you're 87, as Mum was when she was diagnosed, Mum and Dad had retired. They really had nobody to look after but themselves. But if you're 37, not 87, you might have young children. You're still driving them to school and ballet and swimming and soccer. You have responsibilities for other people. You may be the main breadwinner. You may be running a business where you're responsible for lots of other families. So it's a very different level of support that you need as a younger person. That's why we have those special key workers. Again, it's currently the second leading cause of death in Australia, and it is single-handedly the leading cause of disability in people over 65. Neville did tell you I was a good news girl, didn't he? Over 350,000 families have somebody in Australia with dementia. Over 1.2 million of us care for somebody with dementia. So the whole theme of this year's Dementia Awareness Month is you are not alone. So if you have dementia, if you're caring for somebody with dementia, there's many of us out there who have walked the path ahead of you. You are not trying to do this on your own. And please, please, there's help to be had. And over 25,000 families in Australia have somebody under the age of 65 with dementia. And a third of all of these numbers are in New South Wales. So this is what Alzheimer's Australia New South Wales is. These are the people we're trying to support. So they're large numbers. And don't move to Tasmania because it doesn't help. It's all about population distribution. So prevalence, again, if these were sales figures, we'd be happy, but we think that in the next 15 years we're going to have about 550,000 Australians with them, and by the middle of the century, possibly close to 1 million. Part of this, I think, is to do with the fact that the good news is we're getting older. I mean, this was 1971. You look at the number, that yellow line is 65. It was a very small part of our population over the age of 65, and almost nobody living beyond 90. Jump ahead to 2010, and look how it's changed. And it's not just grown, but the shape of the population is changing. And jump ahead again to where they think we'll be at 2050. And we're going to have, 25-30% of our population over the age of 65, right? Which is good news. We're all living longer. Why does nobody cheer? But part of that issue is that getting older is the single biggest risk factor in getting dementia. And these are the age bands that we have. If you're between the age of 60 and 64, 1 in 18 of your age group already has dementia. If you're between the age of 70 and 74, 1 in 10. 80 and 84, 1 in 6. So you can see every 5 years the odds get shorter and shorter. How many people in the room? What it comes down to is 10% of our population today, over the age of 65, already has dementia. And 30% of our population over the age of 85. Last figures, I promise. 1,800 new cases diagnosed every week. That's 1 every 6 minutes in the working week. And they think that number's going to double in the next 15 years and double again by the middle of the century. Part of the reason I tell you these things is because I want you to understand that the changes in the brain, the pathology starts years, even decades before we see those symptoms. Right? You don't wait until you've got a melanoma to start wearing sunblock, do you? Right? We're taking preventative action. Now, we don't have a cure as yet, but certainly the changes, they say now 10, 20, perhaps 25 or even 30 years before we see the symptoms. So mum's dementia, diagnosed at 87, could have started in her early 60s, maybe even earlier. And that's something that I'm very aware of when I'm in my 50s. So, like I said, there is no cure at the moment, so reducing our risk is definitely the best thing that we can do. The risk factors that we can do nothing about, as I said, getting older, well, we can't do anything about that. Tomorrow we're all going to wake up a day older, so enjoy the rest of today. And every day. Your attitude to life must be enjoy every day. We can't change our family history, but we can learn from it. And genetics, we can't choose that either. But you might be surprised to learn that of the 102 different known causes of dementia, only about 5 of them are genetically mappable, and they tend to be the rarer ones and the ones impacting younger people. The factors that we can have some influence over are things like heart health, physical activity, smoking status, and diet. So that's why with the research that we've based our 5 simple steps on, has been conducted over 40 years, and we've looked at health and lifestyle factors, some of these things that we can influence and make choices about, and actually looking at those things. So I'll launch straight into it. Now, some of the paperwork you'll see will refer to midlife as being the best time to start things. These studies that we based this on started with people in their 40s and 50s who are now in their 80s and 90s. And that's why we can only make a claim. Any claims we make have to be backed by scientific studies, and because the studies started with people at that age. We now have people in their 20s and 30s taking part in studies, so perhaps in 20 years' time we'll have more information. But it makes sense. Brain health is important at any age. So 5 simple steps to maximise our brain. And these are your 5 simple steps. We're going to look after our heart. We've got to be physically active. We've got to mentally challenge the brain. We've got to include brain-healthy elements in our diet. And socialising. So now everybody can tick some of these boxes. The fact that you come together as a Probus group means hopefully you're getting some mentally stimulating things happening, and also the fact that you come together socially, right? So you can tick some boxes already. But I'm going to run through them quickly. This is what we're looking at with heart health. And even those top 2 there, blood pressure and cholesterol. In the studies, they found that people who had healthy levels in their 40s and 50s went on to have a very low incidence of dementia. But people who had high cholesterol and high blood pressure went on to have a much higher incidence of dementia. But more importantly, the people who had the unhealthy levels, who brought them down to a healthy level, went on to have a low incidence of dementia, showing us that you can actually reduce the likelihood of dementia. And that's the big message for us. It makes sense with blood pressure. People here dealing with high blood pressure, taking something for it? That's all they need to hear is keep taking something for it. They think it's good for your heart. It's good for your brain as well, okay? Because obviously that's going to reduce the risk of you having strokes and things like that. I'll try and rush through them a bit quickly. Cholesterol. People dealing with high cholesterol here. Are we doing it with diet or with taking tablets? Bit of both. As long as you're doing something. Because they think that cholesterol is the one that's linked to Alzheimer's disease. They're finding that the build-up of cholesterol can accelerate the generation of the tau protein, which links to those plaques and tangles that I was talking about earlier. And so if we can get people to have a healthy cholesterol level, right, it's so important, then maybe we can actually get rid of Alzheimer's disease. What about diabetes? Any diabetics in the room? Are we dealing with that with diet or insulin? A bit of both. But again, it's really important because you know that it has an impact on your mood. But if you get your blood sugars too high, that can inflame the brain tissue as well. Okay, so another good reason to keep them at that healthy level. Obesity, midlife obesity. They found that then there was more likelihood of people going on to have trouble later in life. But it makes sense. If you're carrying too much weight, then your heart's labouring. If you're labouring your heart, then it's obviously... Because the heart, the whole blood system is how we get all of our nutrition and our oxygen to the brain. Smokers. Nobody be game to them, but since there's nobody here smoking, I don't need to tell you how bad it is. Then do it. But again, when you go to your GP, please, please, please don't just have your blood pressure checked or your cholesterol. Make sure you get vitamin B12 levels checked because that has an impact on the brain, the whole nervous system, and vitamin D levels as well. Okay? Because vitamin D is our mood pattern. We need our D levels to be up in order to absorb the B groups as well. So do we know what healthy blood pressure is?
Yep.
Yeah. So 120 over 80 or 110 over 70, higher if you're over 65 is still considered healthy. What about cholesterol? What's the magic number for cholesterol? 4 to 5.5. 4 is what they love, but it's a combination of the good ones, which need to be above 1, the bad ones below 2.2, plus some 20% of the triglycerides. But if it's up to 5.5, they won't ask you to take any action. But once you get over 6, they start to ask you to start bringing that down, so it's worth knowing. And what about a healthy weight for you? And the reason I say for you is they're now starting to... There was a time if they said, well, I'm a 50-year-old male and I'm 6 foot tall, they'd say you should weigh 98 kilos or something, you know. Whereas now they're starting to take into consideration people's frames because they realise that's a factor on what a healthy weight for you is. I've got 2 boys, 23 and 19, and they're both 6 foot tall, but if the 19-year-old stands sideways, you can hardly see him. It's this string beam, whereas the older one is a more normal build, I would say. But if the younger one was carrying that much weight on his frame, it just would be unhealthy. Physical activity. Again, physical activity is healthy. Healthy body, healthy heart, healthy brain. They're all connected.
I'll get out of bed and go to the shower.
No, you need to go a bit further than that. I'm not suggesting you shower in somebody else's place, of course, but I'm just saying you need to do more than just walk to the shower. No showering with a friend. Physical activity, they've actually seen links that actually show that it improves the brain. It can actually improve the brain, improve memory, improve thinking. So physical activity is a really good thing. And I mean, I'm not talking 40-year studies here. I'm talking about doing a quiz with everybody, taking some people out, we'll go for a walk around the block a couple of times, coming back in the second quiz, the people who've done activity, physical activity, would outperform those people who hadn't. It's that definite. And people are putting little gyms or treadmills and things in their workplaces now. The staff think they're being generous, but all they're doing is getting more productive staff if they can get them to use them at lunchtime, because they'll actually be working better in the afternoon. But again, physical activity, it's obviously going to reduce the likelihood of heart attack or stroke, because that's all tied together. But it's about getting that oxygen to the brain, all right? So again, those days where you're standing at the cupboard wondering what you were looking for, have a glass of water, go for a walk. That sort of thing can all help boost the brain. And it also helps to increase this, what we call brain reserve, by building new brain cells. Again, do we know what physical activity levels are recommended? They're saying about half an hour a day, about 5 days a week. But we need to have a combination of walking or something cardio, but also strength training. It's good for the bones and the muscles. And also balancing. So even just if you're on the phone, try balancing on one foot while you're talking to somebody, or walk around the house. But Tai Chi is great, you know, things like that. don't spend half an hour on the phone or just telling yourself that's your exercise for the day. But again, think about what you do now. Think about how you might increase this, because often it's those incidental things. Try and park as close as you can to the supermarket. Park further away. There are more parks, first of all, but also just those little extra bits of walking that we do can actually help the day, all right? Mentally challenge the brain. Now, by this, I wish I had one piece of paper I could give to everybody and say, do these things and that'll challenge your brain. But because I don't know what different people do with their brains during the day, then I don't know what activities I need to then give them that are different. So if you're an accountant and you're dealing with figures all day, I don't want you going home and doing a numbers puzzle because you're using the same part of your brain. We need to vary it. Okay, if you're a solicitor and you're reading documents all day, I don't want you going home and reading a book. You can go home and do a numbers puzzle or do some gardening. But if you're a gardener, you're planning all day what will grow where, and what soil, what light, things like that, then you can go home and sit down and read a book. It's about varying it. If you play music, there are lots of activities, so we want people to vary the activities as well. Because what we're trying to do here is strengthen the connections between the brains, because when we learn new things, we actually focus on those much more intently. So by stimulating the brain, especially engaging in new learning, you're actually strengthening those connections between the brain cells. So it's because you're sparking the synapses, and especially if it's something that you don't normally do. If you normally play music and you play the piano, try learning the guitar. So pick something you enjoy doing. So we want you to vary the activities, do them frequently, but also make sure they're fun, because if they're not fun, you won't stick at them. But just because you've never played bowls doesn't mean you shouldn't give it a go. Just because you've never played golf doesn't mean you shouldn't give it a go. Just because you've never read science fiction doesn't mean you shouldn't give it a go. And that applies to me. I like murder mysteries, which worries my husband a bit, but he likes science fiction. So one of these days I've got to read science fiction. I've got to try it at least. Try it, you just might like it. It's never too late and never too early to start doing something great. Again, libraries are a great place because you can actually research things a little bit, get different books on things, get some ideas, research a holiday. You may not be going on a holiday this year, but look up the countries that you want to go to. Research it. It's all something new. Computers can be good, but if you're working at a computer all day, it means you're sitting, and that's what I don't like about them. But sometimes they can be good if you're trying to. Do we have people here using computers? Yeah? Okay, so I've got some homework for you. Tonight, try using the mouse with the wrong hand. Well, use the wrong hand though. Use the left hand or whatever you don't use. So it doesn't matter. Board games seem to be having another sort of a resurgence, and they're great. And it's just learning a new game, even if it's learning the rules to a new card game. That can be something that you're having to do. Jigsaw puzzles are great, because you're focusing on that. Just even for those, if you say 5 minutes a day. I went up to the roaming around New South Wales, went up to Casino, and the library there. As you walk in, they have a community jigsaw. It's 1,000 pieces. And they've got the box there. And as you go in, you can't help but look at the picture and think, well, that windmill's got to be obvious. And you find yourself looking for the piece. And even if it's only for 5 minutes, you're actually really focused on that. So it's about those little things that we can add to our day to sort of focus things. Short classes like art classes, language classes, music classes are great because first of all, they're social. If they're a 6-week course or something like that, you get to see people, but you're learning something new and you can build on those things a lot. I've got a few exercises. Have we got time for these? They're going to be shut down. Okay. So there's an odd character up there. Can we all see the odd character? Right on the bottom. Where are we? Just about see it down the bottom there. Third from the bottom anyway. Okay. Everybody's feeling really confident because they got that one. Okay. Hidden in there is an O. Where's the letter O? Call out what line it's on.
Where?
See, some people get them quicker than others. So this is where you've got to work out what challenges you. And you'll find that sometimes number puzzles challenge you. Okay, so there's a single note in there. Any musicians in here?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, some people, the musicians, it won't challenge them because they're reading these sort of things all the time, so it doesn't challenge them. So you see that? Can everybody see it? This little one here? Okay, do we know this one? This is where you have to say what colour the word is written in. Okay, so we just read the left-hand column together, okay? So it's written in green, black, blue, yellow, black, red. Okay, that shouldn't have challenged you because it's actually, I've written the words in the right colour. But remember, we're just saying what colour the word is written in. So the first word on this left-hand column again, it's written in red, blue, What happened to these confident people at the first place? You know, there's a preschool down the road. The preschoolers would do it a little faster than you did because they haven't yet learned to read. When I present you with text, your adult brain automatically wants to read it, doesn't it? So you found yourself wanting to read the word when I didn't ask you for that. I wanted the colour it was written in. You see what I mean? Simple little exercises can actually challenge. I'll read the sentence and just then shout out at the end how many times the letter F appears. Finished files are the result of years of scientific study combined with the experience of years. How many things? 6. I've got to find something to challenge you yet. See, the OV sound is a V sound, not a F sound as well, and you find yourself skimming. And also, I'll bet your adult brains read finished files, result years, scientific study, combined experience years, because that's how we read. Right? So again, this is where kindergarten would do better, because they read each word or check each word. A little bit of mental arithmetic. Right? So you can close your eyes, whatever works for you. I'm just going to give you a series of numbers, and then at the end, tell me what they add up to. So we're going to start with 1,000, add 40, add 1,000, add 30, add 1,000, add 20, add 1,000, add 10. What have we got? 5,000. What did you say? So start with 1,000 and add 40. Add 1,000, add 30. Add 1,000, add 20. Add 1,000. What are we up to? It's 4,090. 4,990, and then I said add 10. Because you've not put the no, you've gone 4,090, put the 1 over. I'm more inclined that people do the exercise than I am worried about getting the right answer. And if it's any consolation, there's probably not a teenager in town that could do it without a calculator. So it's just probably not going to use that. Okay, again, I've just got a couple more. All I'm trying to show you here is different things, and I'm really pleased that I got you on one. Different things, and you've got to work out what challenges you, but also what you enjoy doing. So here, so the first word is steadfast. Next one, champagne. People get that one quickly. Next one, blasphemy. Good. Yeah, blasphemy. Yeah. The fourth one is parachute. Somebody's good at this. Last one, waterfall. Waterfall. Thank you. Then you see, so we have people over here that didn't challenge them, right? So I've got to find different things. That's what I mean. Find something that you enjoy doing, but it's got to actually challenge you. As soon as you know you're getting good at something, you've got to find something else. In this one, again, don't read the paragraph, it's a load of rubbish. But hidden in there are a whole load of words of things we might find in a garden. So I've highlighted on the third row, you see the H-O of who and the E of ejected. So a hoe is something you might find in a garden. So it could be part of a word, might span 2 or 3 words. So trowel, well done, right up the top there. Plant. Trowel's on that top line. Plant is where? Third line, yes. Third, plant. Lawn, good. Shrubbery, that's good. You're good at this. There's about another dozen, or there's about a dozen in there. Wasp. You're one of the first people to get wasp. Can't even see it myself now.
Flowers down the bottom.
Flowers down the bottom. Wasp is there. The soup was putrid. Wasp. I'll show you where the others are. So we've got trowel, rake, gnome. Every garden should have a gnome. Home we have plant. You've got lawn, you've got fork. Pond, shed, wasp, you've got shrubbery, you've got flower, you've got patio. Well, people don't have patios anymore, they have decks these days, but anyway. But you see the sort of things you can get, so it's about that. And if I just say, so how about we use N for Neville, because I don't know anybody else's name here today. What's a girl's name starting with N? Another boy's name. What about a fruit? Nectarine, a vegetable? Starting with N, trying to find something.
Artichoke.
Nartichoke, that's cheating. Come back. Maybe a nut, we could probably throw that in. A profession. A nurse. A city. A country. Norway. Something you wear. Necktie. Something you might find in a kitchen. No. A nutcracker, thank you. And something that makes you happy.
News.
News. Oh, really? I find it so depressing. Anyway, you can see the sort of thing. You pick 10 categories, pick a letter, and you just try and come up with things. I mean, it's a kind of a trivia type of question, but all I'm trying to show you is there's a range of different things that you can do, and you don't have to go and enrol in a university course to challenge your brain. Little things you can do, all right, that can actually do it. Okay, last two steps, I'll be really quick. Following a healthy diet, and really because what we're looking here is to make sure that we've got the elements in our diet that are actually going to be good for brain health. A healthy brain, healthy body, healthy heart, it's all connected. And I'm just reminding people here what a balanced diet is. Okay, so we've got some of the starches, so the grains and the potatoes and things. Then we've got fruit and veggies, we've got dairy, we've got protein, and then we do need to have some fats and oils in our diet. And they've even got some dark chocolate in there. Well, yes, it is. It's that rounded diet. But this is what we teach our children in school. 5 serves of veggies, 2 serves of fruit every day, okay? And you don't have to save them up for the main meal. You know, have fruit instead of the morning tea. Or if you, and I never say never to cake and biscuits, but if you're having biscuits morning and afternoon tea, maybe replace one of those with a piece of fruit or something like that. And again, veggies, we love the dark ones. I'm not talking kale. I'm talking about things like beetroots, and I mean, well, if people like kale, you're welcome to it. But you know what I mean, the dark leafy greens. We don't have to go over the top, but it is about trying to keep all of those in the diet. Yes? On warfarin. Now, no, I was going to say, well, beetroot. Beetroot is good dark, but any veggies, carrots and things like that. But even beetroot is good because it's got those lovely antioxidants in it. I'm trying to think of, what else we can get for you. Challenge. I'll get to that. Now, the reason we recommend 2 serves of fish every week is because fish is wonderful in that it's loaded with vitamin B12 and omega-3s. And those 2 things are really important for brain health. So if you're not a fish fan, you don't have to eat fish. You can either take take a fish oil, but you can also get B12 from red meat. But if you're vegetarian, you don't eat any meat or fish at all, fish, then you're going to need to either take a supplement, and I'm not a big fan of people popping pills unless they need to, or get a vitamin B12 injection. But that's something that needs to be checked if you know that red meat and fish are lacking in your diet. The other thing is the omega-3s. You can get omega-3s from grains, which is why we always encourage the grainy bread, but from nuts. I mean, you mentioned nuts earlier, nuts are really good. Walnuts, they look like little brains. You know they're good for the brain. They often say nuts relate to the part of the body they're good for. Cashews, good for the kidney. The Brazil nuts are good for the eye, good for maculas. Brazil nuts, 3 a day, never more than 5. Yeah, but so do I. And almonds are really good. They say in a serving of almonds, just whatever you can fit on 2 fingers. I stack them up, so I get 10.
You haven't mentioned Vegemite.
Well, Vegemite does have B12, but it's also, you'd have to have quite a lot of it to get your daily dose. But the other thing, you do have a lot. The other thing is it's got salt in it. So that's something you need to be wary of.
Yeah, but they brought us up to believe that salt was necessary.
Yes, absolutely. And as a kid, I grew up on a farm where we used to have the salt pot because we grew all our own veggies and the soil lacked iodine. So that was our way of getting iodine, which was good for us, right? So we rubbed the leg of lamb with salt. Every veggie was cooked with it, on the mantelpiece. But we are learning. We don't paint our kids' toys in lead paint anymore. We don't build our houses out of asbestos material anymore. We don't encourage people to smoke. My dear old dad, he had his first cigarette in hospital when he broke his leg as a young man because they thought it would help to calm him. So we're learning more. And I know we were raised on Vegemite. We still encourage kids to have Vegemite because it does have stuff in it. But it's about the balance. And like I said, these are guidelines. If you're under the care of a doctor or a nutritionist, dietitian, please take their advice over these general guidelines. Okay? But yeah, Vegemite's good because it has the B12, but I also am wary of it because of the salt as well. So keep an eye on it. Drink water. And again, the Mediterranean style diet keeps coming up well for brain health as well, because it involves lots of the lean meats and the unsaturated oils, the lovely olive oils, and things like the nuts, the beans, the pulses, those sorts of things. So those are great. And even if you add those to stews, throw lentils and stuff in, it's really good. The other thing that's getting a lot of airtime is turmeric. And turmeric is an anti-inflammatory. So it's good for the brain, but it's good for kidneys, it's good for liver, so it's getting, and that's the spice that we find in curries. So either Indian curries or Asian curries, there's turmeric. You can even buy, the element in it is curcumin, and you can even buy tablets, or you can just buy it and sprinkle it into some of your cooking as well, but that's really good for brain too. Garlic's good. And again, it's about limiting these things, or just having a sensible approach to these foods. The things that are fried foods, very loaded with fats and salt and sugars. And that's where even things like tomato sauce, go home and read your tomato sauce bottle, and you'll see that there's loads of salt and sugar in there. And we're worried about the next generation and how they're eating all these fast foods and processed foods. But we're the ones who do the shopping. And we're bringing the tomato sauce home and teaching them to eat it, instead of encouraging them to have something maybe like just some maybe hummus or something like that they dip their sausage in or meatballs in, rather than the tomato sauce and things like that. So I think we need to start being role models. And look, honestly, I'm less worried about that spoonful of sugar that you put in your tea or coffee, because you know about that. It's the stuff that's hidden in all of these processed foods that we tend to favour these days because they're convenient. You wanted some wine. 2 standard drinks a day. And the club will tell you that a standard drink is 100 mils. But when you ask for a glass of wine, they'll serve you 150. So if you're having 2 glasses of wine in any club, I'm not picking on this club, you're probably over your daily limit. And that's 2 a day, no saving it up till Saturday night. No. No saving it up, okay? Offer expires at midnight. But yes, so check what a standard drink is, and we must have at least 2 alcohol-free days a week. And I know we all have reason to celebrate occasionally, or if you just simply forget how many 2 drinks are, then make sure the next day is an alcohol-free day and have lots of water with it as well. Okay, so we've done this today, so we'll skip that. And the last step, the 5th step, is social activity. So congratulations, being part of Probus means that you're automatically out socialising with people with a common interest and common interests or a variety of interests, so you can actually learn from multiple people. And again, it's about being with people, because it tends to be uplifting if you're around people whose company you enjoy, but it's actually very good for also building the brain reserve. because they found that people who are out and socialise more are much more, seem to have a more stimulation in the brain. And part of it is you don't think about it, but if you come to meet somebody, you recognise their face. So you've used the part of your brain that recognises the face. And you're also then remembering their story. So you were going on holidays. How was New Zealand? Oh, you were playing golf. How did you get on? Oh, you were going off to see a friend in Newcastle. How is she? You remember their story, you see. So it's all that drawing on information that you don't realise you're doing it. But when you're socialising with other people, you're learning more and more. And even if you run into somebody that you were at school with and you've got 50 years to catch up on, at least you go back to that time and you're drawing on old memories and you're actually sparking the brain. So it's really good. And we love it when you can combine social activities with mental activities and physical activities. Dancing is fantastic. Bowls is fine. And what I'd love to do is get these guys to bowl with their wrong hand, because that would challenge them some more, you see. So, again, another piece of homework tonight, because if you do something, I know I mentioned the computers before, but if you do other tasks that we do with our hand, because the brain's such a clever thing, it tries to remember things. Most people drove here today, did they? Yeah. How far did you get down the road before you thought about where the brake was? It's automatic, absolutely. If you're a learner driver, you're very conscious of where everything is, the lanes, the speed, the indicators, But we develop these things that are automatic, so you can drive here not even thinking about driving. You just come here thinking about other things. It's the same with brushing your teeth. What were you thinking about this morning when you brushed your teeth? I was thinking I must have forgot to ring my sister back. I had a friend's dad who died. I must get in touch with her. I'm thinking about should have bought milk. I'm thinking about all sorts of things. I still brush my teeth properly because it's automatic. So tonight, next piece of homework is brush your teeth with the wrong hand. And I don't care if you do it this way, if you take them out to do it, with the wrong hand, because it's a cross-brain thing, you see, as well. So you're using a part of the brain. Yes, sir?
What about your...
Well, then we'll have to find something else to challenge you. Or get you starting to do things with your eyes closed. Put the key in the door with your eyes. Don't drive with your eyes closed, all right? But put the key in the door with the odd hand and your eyes closed. It's things like that, simple day-to-day tasks. We can add an element that we can focus on. So again, some examples. I mean, we love the intergenerational things. They say to spend a day a week with children is really good for the brain, because especially even if you're reading to them, you don't read Mary Had a Little Lamb, Fleece Was White as Snow. You're reading each word slowly to them to try and encourage them to read and things like that. So 1 day a week with children, they say, is really good for the brain. More than 1 day a week, there's no added benefit. So use that information how you like. Yes, sir.
Talking about grandchildren,
yes.
My great-grandson, who's 4.5, rang up and said, Bobby, can I come for a sleepover? And I said, why? I said, I better talk to Mum and Dad. He said, no. He said, there's no problem. He said, they're just stressed.
See, there was a time when 4-year-olds didn't understand the word stress, did they? Maybe when he comes for a sleepover, play some board games, things like that are great. Again, doing activities as a group as well. If you know you've got to meet somebody to go for a walk, you're much more inclined to do it on those days when you'd rather stay home in your slippers because you've got to meet somebody. If it's just you, then you can say, oh, I'll do it tomorrow. But when you're meeting somebody, so that's the beauty of doing things in a group as well. Anyway, just some ideas. Chess. So who was the gentleman talking about chess earlier? Chess is great because it's a strategy game. So you've got to do.
Very good player.
Well, that's the challenge. You see, we've got to get better. Okay, so those are the 5 simple steps. They're all in the booklet. But just one thing. I know everything I've talked about so far has been about trying to keep the brain itself healthy and avoid disease. But clearly you can't talk about brain health without at least one slide talking about avoiding brain injury. So please, and what we're talking about is a loss of consciousness. Please, if you're on a bike, motorbike, push bike, please wear a helmet or encourage the generations to do it. Cross at the pedestrian crossing. Again, I know in country towns we don't do it so much, but it's read between the lines. What we're saying is the traffic needs to see you and you need to see the traffic. So there's no surprises for anyone. Wear a seatbelt, even if it's only for a short journey. Please wear a seatbelt. And ladders. Ladders are a favourite for head injury. So my rule is if you're under the age of 15 or over the age of 50, you have to think of ladders as a team sport. Don't play with ladders unless you've got someone to play with, all right? So, and I know it's not always convenient. You just want to change the light bulb. You just want that thing from the top shelf. But having a head injury is much less convenient, let me tell you. But, again, we talked about depression and how sometimes those first signs of people becoming a little bit withdrawn could be, depression can be managed. So if you know somebody's a bit flat, encourage them over. Come out for a cuppa, come for a walk, go and have a cuppa, a small glass of red wine, something like that. But encourage them to talk to their doctor because depression can be managed. And sometimes the signs of depression and those first signs of dementia are very similar. So we want to at least try to hopefully eliminate depression or hopefully find it was depression and they come back to being their old selves again. We do have a brainy app that you can do. It's on the back of these booklets. I'm told the QR code doesn't work for the new app. If you've got smartphones at all, it's not an IQ test. It actually asks you questions about your health and lifestyle, and you can get that online as well. Just go onto the website, and it will say how often do you go for a walk, how often do you see friends, how often do you drink water, and how much do you eat fish regularly. It's those sorts of questions, and it will give you 3 tips for your lifestyle. Because if you run marathons, it's not going to suggest you do more exercise. Or, if you eat fish 3 times a week, it won't suggest you add that to your diet. It needs to give you tips for your brain, because your brain matters for you. And we say it takes 21 days to make or break a habit. So I would urge you and invite you for the next 21 days, try to do something consciously brain healthy. And I don't care if it's brushing your teeth with the wrong hand, having some nuts instead of that extra sticky bun, or going for that extra walk. If you do it for 3 weeks, it'll become part of a habit, and you'll then find yourself on actually a healthier lifestyle. And that is finally the end. So this again is the most important information I can give you, that helpline number. I've got some help sheets here, I've got more in the van if we need them, and I've got the booklets too, so please help yourself to those. Thank you.